The mysterious signal. The galaxy had been at peace for centuries. The Galactic Coalition, a group of powerful alien species, controlled the stars. They governed with a firm hand, ensuring no one challenged their rule. But deep in the quiet void of space, something strange was happening. Something the Coalition had never anticipated. It started with a signal. At first, it was a faint blip, barely noticeable. A few random bursts of data in the deep expanse of the galaxy. But soon, the signal grew stronger, more structured, almost as if it were calling out. The Coalition's highest-ranking officials had never heard anything like it before. It wasn't from any known alien race, and it wasn't a simple malfunction. This was something deliberate. A team of scientists aboard the Coalition's flagship, the Exemplar, worked tirelessly to analyze the signal. It was coming from an area far from any known civilizations, a region of space long believed to be uninhabitable. Some speculated that the area was filled with rogue asteroids, unstable black holes, or even dead stars. No one had ventured there in centuries. Can we trace the origin? General Verith, leader of the Coalition's military arm, asked the lead scientist, Dr. Lyra Telner, his voice filled with uncertainty. Dr. Telner, a brilliant mind known for solving the most complex problems, stared at her screen in disbelief. The signal appears to be coming from a sector labeled Sector Theta. It's impossible. That sector was abandoned thousands of years ago. It's a dead zone. Verith frowned. But this signal is too organized to be from anything natural. It's too precise. Indeed, the signal was unlike anything the Coalition had ever encountered. It wasn't just random noise or a simple message. It was a call, one that resonated deep in the stars, as though someone, or something, was trying to communicate across space itself. The military officers gathered around Dr. Telner's station, their faces pale with concern. The signal was too important to ignore, too strange, too powerful. What are we dealing with here? Verith demanded. What is it? Dr. Telner hesitated for a moment, as if considering whether she should voice her thoughts. Finally, she spoke in a low, urgent tone. I don't know, but it feels like it's been waiting for someone to hear it. A chill ran down everyone's spine. The sense of mystery surrounding the signal was growing by the minute. Was this the work of a new alien species, or something much older? Something the Coalition had forgotten. The Exemplar made course corrections, heading toward the source of the signal. The further they went into Sector Theta, the stranger the space around them became. The stars seemed dimmer, the darkness deeper. It was as if the universe itself was trying to keep them away. The signal, now more intense than ever, led them to an area known as the Void, a place where no known ships dared to enter. It was here, in the heart of the Void, that the signal seemed to emanate from. Suddenly, Dr. Telner's screen flashed brightly. The signal had suddenly become much clearer. The bursts of data, once random, began to form a distinct pattern. It was almost as if it were a code, a language that could be deciphered. Captain, Dr. Telner's voice shook with excitement. The signal, it's not just a random pattern. It's a message. Verith's eyes narrowed. From who? Before Dr. Telner could respond, an enormous object appeared on the scanners. A massive shadow stretched across the void, blocking out the stars. The ship was ancient, its design unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. It was a behemoth of dark metal, glowing faintly with energy that pulsed rhythmically, matching the signal's intensity. That's no alien ship, Dr. Telner whispered in awe. That's human technology. The realization hit like a thunderclap. The Coalition had long believed that humanity, the race that had once ruled Earth, was extinct, a forgotten relic of the galaxy's past. The humans had been thought to have been wiped out during the Great Wars centuries ago. No one knew what had happened to their home planet or their technology. Earth was no longer on any galactic map. But here, in the heart of the galaxy, an ancient human ship, one of unimaginable size and power, had been lying dormant, waiting to be awakened. Verith stared at the screen, his mind racing. How? How is this possible? The ship's signal continued to pulse, its patterns growing more defined. It was as if the ship itself was alive, responding to their presence. Something powerful had been sleeping in this dark corner of space for far too long. And now, it was awake. A sense of dread filled the room as they approached. This wasn't just any ship. This was a supercarrier, a legendary warship of the ancient human fleets. No one knew how it had survived or how it had remained hidden for so long. But now it had been reawakened, and its presence was sending shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The ship is enormous, Verith muttered. If this ship is human, then they're not gone. They're back. Dr. Tellner looked at the screen, her eyes wide. We have to move carefully. Whoever controls this ship will have power like no other species. If it's humans, then we've underestimated them. The implications of their discovery were monumental. The Galactic Coalition, once supreme and uncontested, now faced a terrifying new reality. Humanity, a long-lost species thought to be extinct, had returned, and with them, a weapon of unimaginable power. The crew of the Exemplar could only wonder, what would happen when the galaxy learned the truth about the humans' long-lost supercarrier? And who would dare challenge it now that it had awoken? As the ship drifted closer to the ancient human supercarrier, they knew one thing for certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. The awakening. As the Exemplar drew closer to the ancient human supercarrier, a heavy silence filled the command center. The crew's eyes remained glued to their screens, watching the immense ship loom closer in the dark void of space. The structure was far beyond anything the Galactic Coalition had ever seen, its technology archaic yet advanced in ways that defied all logic. Captain Verith stood at the front of the room, his arms crossed as he gazed at the massive ship. His mind was racing. How had humanity managed to create something like this? And why had it remained hidden for so long? This ship, Verith muttered to himself, still in disbelief. It could change everything. Dr. Tellner, standing nearby, was still processing the data. Her fingers danced across the controls, each piece of information sparking new questions. The signal that had been guiding them here was unlike anything she had encountered before. It wasn't just a distress signal, nor was it a simple call for help. It was a command, a beacon, a call for attention from an intelligence that had been dormant for centuries. "Captain," Dr. Tellner said, her voice shaky with excitement, "this is no ordinary ship. This is a human supercarrier, I'm sure of it. And it's not dead. It's alive." The words hit the crew like a wave of ice-cold water. The idea that humanity had survived, hidden away for so long, was both exhilarating and terrifying. The supercarrier had been lost to history, a mere legend to most species. But now, it was real. It was here. And they had no idea what kind of power it wielded. Verith turned toward Dr. Tellner. "Can you establish contact with it?" "I'm trying," she replied, adjusting the frequency on her console. "But the technology is far beyond anything we've ever encountered. It's like the ship is communicating through its own language, a pattern we can't decode yet." The entire crew was on edge. The longer they waited, the more the sense of danger grew. What if this ship wasn't as dormant as it appeared? What if the humans had left a message, an instruction, a command waiting to be unleashed? As the Exemplar closed the distance, a sudden shift in the ship's energy field caught Dr. Tellner's attention. The supercarrier was reacting to their presence. Its lights, which had been dim and cold, suddenly began to pulse with a bright blue glow. An eerie hum vibrated through the Exemplar, almost as if the ship was awakening from a long slumber. "What's happening?" Verith demanded, his voice tight with tension. Dr. Tellner's eyes widened. "The supercarrier, it's responding. It's coming to life." For a moment, nothing seemed to change. The hum continued, the ship's lights flickered, and then a massive shudder rocked the Exemplar. The walls groaned as the very fabric of space seemed to bend under the power of the supercarrier's awakening. "We're being pulled in," shouted one of the officers at the helm. "The gravity of that ship, it's too strong. We're losing control." "Prepare for impact," Verith ordered, his heart racing. The crew scrambled to stabilize the ship, but the pull of the supercarrier's immense power was too great. The Exemplar was dragged toward it like a helpless piece of debris. Dr. Tellner frantically worked at her console, trying to break through the interference. "If we don't act now, we'll be pulled into its core. We'll never escape." The lights on the Exemplar flickered wildly as the ship drew closer. Time seemed to stretch, and the atmosphere grew thick with anticipation. What would happen when they reached the supercarrier? Would they be able to regain control before it was too late? Suddenly, there was a violent jolt, and the Exemplar lurched forward. The ship's engines roared as they fought to maintain control. But it was too late. The Exemplar was within the gravitational pull of the ancient supercarrier, and there was no turning back. With a final, powerful lurch, the Exemplar was yanked into the supercarrier's docking bay. The crew was thrown from their seats as the ship crashed into the dark interior. Sparks flew, and alarms blared throughout the vessel. Verith quickly regained his bearings. "Everyone, hold on. Get to your stations," he barked, trying to regain control of the chaos around him. Dr. Tellner's face was pale as she glanced at the damage. "We've made it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. "We're inside." The supercarrier was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. Its enormous halls stretched far beyond the capacity of the Exemplar. The interior was dark, cold, and ancient, yet there was a faint pulse of energy in the air. The walls were adorned with strange symbols and glowing runes, a forgotten language that no one on the crew could understand. Verith ordered the crew to disembark and secure the area. As they stepped into the abandoned supercarrier, the feeling of ancient power washed over them. It was as though they were trespassing in a sacred, long-forgotten temple. "This place, it's massive," one of the officers muttered in disbelief. Verith motioned for them to move forward. "Stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with here." As they ventured deeper into the heart of the ship, the crew could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. The supercarrier had been built by a civilization long gone, by humans who had once ruled the stars. But now it lay silent, waiting to be rediscovered. A sense of dread hung in the air as the crew ventured further into the bowels of the ship. They were no longer in control. The supercarrier was awake, and they had entered its domain. But what they would discover inside would shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. The first encounter. The crew of the Exemplar cautiously stepped off the ship and into the dark corridors of the ancient human supercarrier. The silence inside was overwhelming, broken only by the occasional clanging of boots against the cold, metallic floor. The interior was enormous, impossibly large, stretching far beyond what should have been possible for a ship of any known design. The walls, once gleaming with advanced technology, were now tarnished and covered in strange symbols that flickered intermittently with a faint blue light. Captain Verith led the group, his hand tightly gripping the pulse rifle slung over his shoulder. His nerves were on edge. Every shadow, every creak of the ship, seemed to echo with the unknown. His thoughts raced as he looked at the vast emptiness around them. What kind of power had built this place? Why had humanity disappeared? "Stay close," Verith ordered, his voice steady but tinged with unease. "We need to find control. If this ship is still operational, we may need to leave at a moment's notice." Dr. Tellner remained at his side, staring at the flickering lights and the walls covered in ancient runes. "These symbols, they're unlike anything I've seen. It's almost like the ship is alive. I don't think it's just a ship. I think it's a living vessel." The crew's unease grew with every step they took deeper into the supercarrier. Every corridor seemed to lead into another, and the sheer scale of the ship made it feel like they were walking through an abandoned city rather than a starship. There were no signs of life, no sounds except their own footsteps. It was as if the supercarrier had been completely deserted, but something didn't sit right. "Captain," said Officer Jalin, one of the senior officers, "there's something strange here. I scanned the ship. It's not just its size. Its energy signature is fluctuating. It's like the ship is adapting. We're not alone." Verith's grip tightened on his weapon. "What do you mean by adapting?" "From what I can tell," Jalin replied, his voice hesitant, "it's like the ship is responding to our presence. The energy signature isn't stable, almost like it's trying to detect us, or communicate." Before Verith could respond, a loud thudding sound echoed from deeper within the ship. The entire crew froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The sound reverberated through the walls, a heavy, almost mechanical rhythm. "Did you hear that?" Dr. Tellner whispered, her voice barely audible. Verith nodded. He motioned for the crew to take cover behind a nearby bulkhead. Sweat ran down his forehead as he listened intently. The thudding continued, louder now, with an almost rhythmic quality. It was as if someone, was coming toward them. "Get ready for anything," Verith muttered, his fingers twitching near the trigger of his pulse rifle. The sound grew closer. It was unmistakable now. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps, the kind that echoed with an unnatural power. Verith's eyes darted around the dark corridor. Could it be another crew member? A stray animal? Or something else entirely? The footsteps stopped. The silence was suffocating. Then, without warning, a low rumble reverberated through the floor, and a door at the far end of the corridor began to open slowly. A strange blue light poured from the crack, casting eerie shadows across the hallway. The crew held their breath, unsure of what they were about to face. They were armed, but whatever was waiting for them seemed more powerful than anything they could imagine. Through the door emerged a figure, humanoid but unmistakably different. Tall, with glowing blue eyes, and clad in strange, metallic armor that seemed to shift and pulse with light. It was as though it had materialized out of the ship itself. The figure spoke in a language none of the crew could understand. It was deep, guttural, alien. But it wasn't the language that shook them to their core. It was the aura around the being. This creature emanated an undeniable sense of power. It felt ancient, untouchable, and far beyond any technology the crew had encountered. Verith raised his pulse rifle. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice hoarse with uncertainty. The being remained silent, staring at them with those glowing blue eyes. Then, to their astonishment, it spoke again. Its voice, although unintelligible, seemed to resonate within their very minds. It was as if the ship itself had allowed them to hear it. "You trespass on sacred ground," the being said, its tone filled with authority. "This place is forbidden. You are not welcome." Verith's heart raced. The words echoed in his mind, vibrating with an overwhelming sense of power. But before he could respond, the being raised its hand, and the air around them seemed to distort, crackling with energy. The temperature dropped, and the walls began to hum, responding to the presence of this figure. The ship, it seemed, was alive. "We will not let you leave," the being continued, its voice growing stronger, more forceful. "Stand back," Verith ordered his crew, realizing that the situation had escalated beyond anything they had prepared for. Before anyone could act, the air shimmered, and the beam disappeared, fading into the shadows of the ancient ship. The crew stood frozen, their hearts pounding, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had they just encountered a guardian of some kind, or something more dangerous? Dr. Tellner looked at Verith, her face pale. What was that? Verith didn't have an answer. He had no idea what that being was, but one thing was clear. The Supercarrier was not just an abandoned ship. It was a fortress, guarded by something ancient and powerful. "We need to get back to the Exemplar and report this," Verith said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. "And we need to figure out what we've just unleashed. Because whatever it is, it's not going to let us leave so easily." The crew slowly began to retreat, but they knew in their hearts that this was just the beginning. The supercarrier had awoken, and the true horror of what lay within was only starting to reveal itself. The awakening of the supercarrier. As the crew cautiously backed away from the mysterious figure, the ship's eerie hum grew louder. It was almost as though the Exemplar wasn't the only ship present, like the supercarrier itself was alive, breathing, reacting to their presence. Every step they took away from the door felt like a step into unknown danger. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The walls, once silent and still, now seemed to shift as if alive with some hidden consciousness. Verith kept a tight grip on his rifle, his eyes scanning every shadow. Stay alert. Whatever that was, it's clear we're not welcome here. They made their way back through the corridors of the supercarrier, the path now more uncertain. The lights flickered, casting strange, unearthly shadows that made it difficult to trust their surroundings. But there was something more than just the unsettling atmosphere. It was the overwhelming presence of power, like the entire ship itself was waking up, coming to life. The further they traveled into the depths of the supercarrier, the more the feeling of being hunted grew. Verith couldn't shake the sensation that the ship was reacting to their every move, as if it was watching them. The flickering lights were no longer just an inconvenience. They were part of the supercarrier's warning system. Dr. Tellner stopped suddenly, her eyes wide. "Captain, look at this." She pointed to a wall that had previously seemed blank. Now faint symbols began to glow, slowly revealing themselves, as though being activated by their presence. The symbols were intricate, yet their meaning was beyond their understanding. They pulsed with an unnatural energy, like they were alive. Verith walked over to examine the wall. His fingers brushed against the glowing symbols, and instantly, a surge of cold energy ran up his arm. He yanked his hand away, startled. "What was that?" Jalen asked, stepping closer. "I don't know, but I don't like it," Verith muttered. He studied the wall carefully, noting how the symbols seemed to shift when they moved. It was as if the ship was communicating with them, but in a language that no one could decipher. "Can we decode it?" Dr. Tellner asked. She was already pulling out her data pad, trying to capture the symbols. "I don't think it's something we can easily decode," Verith said, his voice tense. "This ship is beyond our technology. We need to focus on getting back to the Exemplar and getting out of here before it's too late." But even as he said this, a deep rumble shook the supercarrier. The entire ship seemed to shudder as if it were waking from a long slumber. The lights flickered violently, and the hum grew louder, almost deafening. Then it stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. The crew stood still, waiting, hearts racing. Verith's mind raced with questions. What was happening to the supercarrier? What had they awakened? Dr. Tellner was the first to speak. "Captain, look." She pointed to a section of the wall that had suddenly opened, revealing a large chamber. The room was vast, with walls lined with glowing crystals, emitting a strange light that bathed the space in an eerie, almost otherworldly glow. The air was thick with energy. Verith's heart skipped a beat. This was the core. This was what powered the supercarrier. He could feel it now, the immense power, the pulse of energy beneath the ship. He motioned for the crew to follow, his instincts telling him they needed to understand this power if they had any hope of controlling the situation. But as they stepped into the room, the atmosphere shifted once again. The ground beneath their feet vibrated, and an intense pressure filled the air. The ship was not just alive. It was reacting to them, to their intrusion. "This is it," Verith said, his voice low, his eyes scanning the walls. The crystals were pulsing, and he knew that somehow they were connected to the supercarrier's very life force. "We need to figure out how to control this." Suddenly, a loud mechanical voice echoed through the room, filling the space with a chilling resonance. "Humans," the voice boomed, "you have trespassed upon sacred ground. You will not control what you do not understand." Verith and his crew froze. The voice seemed to come from everywhere, inside their heads, echoing through their bodies. "We have awakened," the voice continued. "And so, you will awaken the consequences." A massive surge of energy filled the room. The walls began to pulse with violent light, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble with force. Verith's heart raced as he realized what this meant. The Supercarrier wasn't just an ancient ship. It was a weapon, a vessel of unimaginable power, and it was responding to them in a way that couldn't be ignored. The words sent a shiver down Verith's spine, but he wasn't afraid. He knew the ship was powerful, but now he was in control. "I don't need to control you," Verith muttered, his voice steady despite the growing intensity. "I just need to survive." With that, Verith pushed further, tapping deeper into the ship's systems. He felt the immense power surging through him, like a torrent of energy that wanted to break free. The ship fought against him, but he held his ground. His crew's survival depended on this moment. Suddenly, there was a crackling sound, followed by an explosion of light. The Supercarrier's voice screamed in fury, but Verith didn't flinch. He had done it. He had breached the ship's core systems. The lights in the room flickered, and the walls seemed to quiet. The robotic guardian halted in its tracks, its mechanical eyes turning toward Verith. The entire ship had gone silent, as if it was waiting to see what he would do next. Verith stood tall, his chest heaving, but his mind calm. He had done what was once thought impossible. He had connected with the Supercarrier. Now it was his to control. "Now," Verith said with a grim smile, "let's see who's in charge." With a swift motion, Verith sent a command to the ship's systems. The Supercarrier's enormous power reserves began to shift, the ship's core energy being rerouted to protect them. The robotic guardian stood motionless for a brief moment before stepping back, as if recognizing the new authority. The crew watched in stunned silence. They had survived the unimaginable. They had gained control over the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. But Verith knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The ship was still a weapon, still a threat, and now that they had awoken it, they would have to live with the consequences. But for now, they had won. They had gained control, and the galaxy would soon know that humanity was no longer just a species to be ignored. It was a turning point. The Supercarrier was theirs, and the entire galaxy was about to be shaken to its core. The aftermath, and the galaxies in shock. The room was eerily quiet. The hum of the Supercarrier systems reverberated through the walls, but there was no longer the overwhelming roar of chaos that had filled the air moments before. Verith stood at the pedestal, his breath steadying after the storm he had just weathered. Sweat dripped down his face, and his body trembled from the mental strain, but his eyes were focused, unyielding. He had done it. He had tamed the beast. As Verith stepped back from the pedestal, he glanced around at the crew. They were still in shock, their faces frozen in a mix of disbelief and awe. The robotic guardian, once an unstoppable force, stood still like a dormant statue, waiting for instructions. The Supercarrier, once a weapon of unimaginable destruction, was now a tool in their hands. "Verith," Jalen finally spoke, his voice low, almost reverent. "Did we really do it?" Verith turned toward him, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. "We did." The crew exchanged uncertain glances, as if struggling to process what had just happened. They had fought their way through impossible odds, surviving the wrath of the Guardian, battling against a ship far older and more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. And now, it was theirs. The Supercarrier hummed with a life of its own, responding to Verith's commands, ready to follow its new master. The ship's vast systems came online in a synchronized, flawless motion, each one acknowledging the change in leadership. The Supercarrier, the most advanced and terrifying warship in the galaxy, was now under human control. But the victory felt hollow. The calm after the storm was unsettling, as though the universe itself had paused to witness the shift in power. "We need to figure out what happens next," Dr. Tellner said, her voice laced with tension. "This ship, it's not just a weapon. It's a whole civilization's legacy. And now, it's ours to wield. Verith nodded. We've awakened something far beyond what we can understand. But we're not just going to let it sit idle. We need to take action. As he spoke, the Supercarrier's systems began to respond to his thoughts, as though the ship itself was listening. Verith felt a shiver run down his spine. He had thought he was in control, but the more he interacted with the ship, the more it seemed as though it was controlling him as well. This is no longer just about survival, Verith continued, his gaze steady and focused. We've sent a message to the galaxy. Humanity is no longer weak. We have the power to shape our own destiny. As if on cue, the ship's sensors activated, and a holographic display appeared before him. The galaxy unfolded in brilliant colors, star systems stretching out in every direction. And there, in the vastness of space, was a single word that made Verith's heart race: Galactic Coalition. The Supercarrier had not just awakened, it had broadcasted a signal, a message to the entire galaxy. The galaxy now knew humanity had risen to power. The balance of power was shifting, and it wasn't going to stop here. Verith's hand clenched into a fist. The message was clear. The galaxy had underestimated them. The Supercarrier was their declaration of strength, their answer to all those who had ever seen them as insignificant. But Verith wasn't naive. He knew the galactic powers would not take this lightly. The Galactic Coalition would not let this go unanswered. We've just made ourselves a target, Verith said, his voice steady, though the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. They will come for us. Jelen's face hardened. Then we'll be ready for them. The crew nodded in agreement, their fear giving way to resolve. They had survived the unimaginable. And now, they would face the galaxy's response head-on. Verith looked out across the star system displayed on the holographic map, the weight of the moment sinking in. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity's place in the galaxy would never be the same again. As the Supercarrier powered up, ready to set its course, Verith made a decision. It was time to make their move. The fate of the galaxy, and humanity's role within it, would be determined in the coming days. And the universe would remember this moment, the day Earth's ancient Supercarrier awakened, and everything changed.